tonight, tensions higher than ever in the race for the White House just days before voters head to the polls. In Dayton, Ohio today, this moment of panic at a Donald Trump rally. Secret Service agents racing to his side after a protester tried to rush the stage. It comes after that chaos in Chicago, violent clashes between protesters and supporters inside that auditorium.
Trump haters infiltrated the arena, bent on disruption.
Donald Trump is not welcome in Chicago, and we're going to make that clear today.
They accomplished that. Trump canceled the rally, provoking a violent reaction from Trump supporters.
Well, a 22-year-old college protester arrested at an Ohio rally this weekend after rushing the stage towards Donald Trump. His charges include inducing a panic and disorderly conduct. But Peter Johnson Jr. says these are not only disruptors, putting Trump at risk, but our constitutional rights as well. Right, Peter?
Hey, I never fight with Fox and Friends, but I disagree with the characterization of protesters, Steve Doocy. This is an attempt at assailant. He likes to be called a protester. Maybe he's a professional protester. And it's part of the new variations in America of what the First Amendment really is. The First Amendment does not confer upon you or me or Steve Doocy the right to go to someone's rally and try to disrupt it or destroy it, or to pull apart posters, or to start fights, or to attempt to commit an assault on a presidential candidate. That was one of the most frightening things that I've seen in my lifetime, bar video of a political assassination.
The guy said he just wanted to grab the mic and say, Donald Trump is a racist.
Okay, but grab the mic. Do you think Donald Trump is holding the mic? He has the right to hold the mic under the First Amendment. And so when you take the mic, as MoveOn.org and Black Lives and other organizations send out tweets and send out emails to folks, when you grab that mic, you're tearing the First Amendment. You're saying you don't have a right to speak. The people who are there don't have a right to assembly. Let's chill their right to hear something. Let's intimidate them. And I really need to tell you, Steve, because I've thought about it, and I know it's a harsh thing to say, but this is the seeds of terror in this country. And let me tell you why. Terror means make it impossible to go to the public square. Make people afraid to go to Times Square. Make them afraid to go to train stations. Make them afraid to travel. Make them afraid to go to a Donald Trump rally. Make them afraid to go to any political rally. Make them afraid they might be hurt, they might be arrested, they might be intimidated.
This election is so stupid because no one's talking about the fact that we are not voting on those people who really control things. Those people we really should be interested in instead of the carnival of an election that we have going on. That's why this story is so important, because at all its stupidity, it's about those people. Those people who just got together for their secretive annual gathering called the AEI World Forum. AEI stands for American Enterprise Institute. Those people all get together every year at a super swanky resort in Georgia, the Sea Island Resort. The people who actually attended this meeting. Ready for the list? In part, Apple CEO Tim Cook, Google co-founder Larry Page, Tesla's Elon Musk, Mitch McConnell, Karl Rove, Paul Ryan, Tom Cotton, and a bunch of other influential Republicans. Philip Anschutz was there, a billionaire GOP donor. The publisher of the New York Times, Arthur Sulzberger, also there. All of these people, they all flew to this posh resort in Georgia on their private jets, as detailed by federal aviation records, to get together for their annual secretive gathering. Now let's talk about what those people were actually talking about, because that's what makes them those people in the first place. According to Crystal's emailed report from the gathering, it was all about how to stop Trump. All these Republicans and moguls are all worried about Trump because he's not one of those people. So they aren't sure how they'll control him.
Well, it seems like a win by Donald Trump will mean a serious blow to that good old boys club of billionaires because they are doing everything to make sure he does not make it to the Oval Office. They're pulling out all the stops and all the cash, and they're throwing it. Take a look right there at this list. These are just some of the big hitters who have put tons of money, millions into this campaign. You've got names like George Soros, worth $25 billion. Paul Singer, he just made $2 billion last week. Ken Griffin, $7 billion. The list goes on and on and on. They're doing everything to derail Donald Trump. And the big question is, why?
America is pretty darn great right now. America's making strides right now. America's better off than it was right now. The American people should be proud about what we've achieved together over the last 8 years since the recession hit. We're great right now. And what the folks who are running for office should be focused on is how we can make it even better. Not insults and schoolyard taunts and manufacturing facts. Not divisiveness along the lines of race or faith.
Violence broke out over the weekend at several Donald Trump campaign rallies. Left-wing thugs battled with police in Chicago and St. Louis. One even tried to storm the stage at a rally in Dayton, Ohio. But instead of blaming the professional hooligans, the political chattering class blamed Mr. Trump. But the person responsible for fomenting political unrest is not Donald Trump. It's President Obama. For the past 7.5 years, this man has been stoking division and discord. You want to talk about creating controversy? Fine, let's talk about Baltimore and Ferguson, Missouri, and Trayvon Martin. President Obama is the one who told his followers, if they bring a knife to the fight, we bring a gun. That's what he said. I don't recall too many Republicans getting upset over that remark. Many conservative pundits still do not understand why Americans are flocking to Donald Trump. They seem bewildered that we've ignored establishment overlords like Mitt Romney and the uppity-ups at the National Review. So, for the sake of all you Republicans in name only, let me explain what's going on here. The folks who pay the bills in this country are fed up. We're tired of being called racist and homophobic and xenophobic. The silent majority is mad as hell, and we're not going to take it anymore.
Some of the millions of people around the world who do not believe man is responsible for global warming could soon be facing more than just mockery from the left. President Obama's top lawyer admits the government is considering much more forceful action. Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen tonight on the growing campaign against politically incorrect thinking.
Testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee, Attorney General Loretta Lynch said Wednesday the Obama administration has directed federal law enforcement to investigate whether big oil companies and other so-called climate change deniers should face civil racketeering prosecution the same way the tobacco companies did under President Clinton when cigarette makers came under fire for issuing studies denying harmful effects from smoking.
Under President Obama, the Department of Justice has done nothing so far about the climate denial scheme.
We have received information about it and have referred it to the FBI to consider whether or not it meets the criteria for what we could take action on.
The Attorney General's use of the word could is very telling, because it's not as if they're going to analyze these issues on the merits and say, would we or should we do it? They're looking for a pretext. Could we go after them?
Any federal action against opponents of the administration on climate change issues would evoke parallels with the IRS scandal of 2013, when it was disclosed that officials at Internal Revenue back in early 2010 had targeted conservative and Tea Party groups for additional scrutiny in their applications for tax-exempt status, a scandal President Obama denied was a scandal at all.
You're saying no corruption?
No.
None?
No. There were some boneheaded decisions out of a
but
local
no mass
office.
corruption.
Not even mass corruption, not even a smidgen of corruption.
Good evening, friends. We start tonight with the trade deal President Obama just won't give up on. The Trans-Pacific Partnership will be the signature trade deal and a big part of the Obama legacy if it goes through. In a recent interview, National Security Advisor Susan Rice said the president remains fully committed to working to achieve ratification on the U.S. side and encouraging all our TPP partners to move through their domestic processes to do the same. A lot of expectations there, no doubt. Opponents to the deal claim that the TPP is an absolute job killer and will destroy the nation's manufacturing sector even further. The president stands against the majority of his own party. A lot of the Democrats in majority, they don't want it. Both Democrat candidates, Clinton and especially Bernie Sanders, are on record against the deal. The next president would have to live with this trade deal if it goes through. So why is the president pushing so hard for it? For more, let's bring in Scott Paul. He's the president of Alliance for American Manufacturing. Scott, good to have you with us tonight.
Good to be with you.
We got some strange politics going on here. Why is the president so adamant when he knows that most of his party doesn't want it and the two people who could be president don't want it, and even Trump doesn't want it?
Ed, it's a really good question. I struggle with that almost every day, trying to figure out what the benefit is to the presidency. And what I can gather from this point is he views it as part of his legacy, as part of the Obama legacy, much like the Affordable Care Act or diplomatic relations with Cuba. And even though the study the administration uses predicts it's going to lose manufacturing jobs. It's going to lose manufacturing jobs. He continues to move forward. He moves forward even though Mitch McConnell says the votes aren't there in the Senate. And Mitch McConnell is a supporter of this ad, as you know. So it's a little bit mystifying to me as to why the president would continue to press it so forcefully.
Some hard facts to back up the notion that President Obama's health care reform has been a financial failure. Correspondent Rich Edson looks at the disturbing events that are costing you and your fellow Americans some serious money.
More than $1 billion wasted and $1 billion more owed. That's the assessment of the majority staff of the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations and its report on the Obamacare cooperatives. The details were first reported by Fox News.
What we found out is that a lot of bad decisions were made.
Obamacare created 23 nonprofit cooperatives, insurance companies designed to increase competition and lower costs. More than half have failed. The administration loaned $2.4 billion to these co-ops. The failed dozen borrowed $1.2 billion of that. The committee report says they have repaid nothing to the government, and in addition owe doctors, hospitals, and others more than $1 billion. At a Thursday hearing, administration officials refused to confirm the full report, saying officials are still reviewing it.
You're a smart guy. Why should we be having to give you numbers that are publicly available? Get the numbers yourself.
More than 17 million Americans this morning face a severe weather threat. Storm systems are targeting the Northeast and the South. Flooding in southern states has killed at least 6 people. 4 of those deaths are in Louisiana. President Obama has issued a disaster declaration for the area. David Begnaud is in Natchitoches Parish, where levees are on the brink of failing. David, good morning.
Good morning. The levees are holding for now. There's so much flooding around here, you can't tell where one bayou starts and the other one ends. Here along Saline Bayou, they've got giant sandbags, but the water's seeping through toward the community of Clarence. Livestock are in danger of drowning, and homes could be flooded if a levee fails. Elsewhere around the country, more flooding and tornadoes. Overnight, floodwater rushed down the streets of Springfield, Missouri. Emergency teams have already performed close to 60 rescues. Several tornadoes barreled through eastern and central Arkansas Sunday, as a fast-moving system brought pounding rain and large hail to the region.
Man, look at it now. Wow, look at that.
The violent weather knocked out power for more than 9,000 people. National Guard troops have helped to rescue more than 3,000 people in Louisiana, where the widespread flooding is blamed for at least 4 deaths. 78-year-old Harold Worsham drowned after recovering belongings from his submerged home. Kenneth Worsham is his son.
They shouldn't have been out here. They was coming in there when the water was just, I believe, just a little bit too rough.
Relentless rain last week pushed lakes to levels not seen in decades. Close to 5,000 homes have been flooded since then. More than 24 of them are in Natchitoches Parish, where a levee running along the Saline Bayou is in danger of failing. Drone footage shows floodwater already spilling into nearby communities. A breach would threaten another 600 homes in the community of Clarence.
I thought I'd have to see my kids live through this.
Crystal Brown has 8 feet of water in her front yard. She's lost everything.
It's terrible to have to sit there and hold your kids at night and watch them cry because they've lost everything.
And here in Natchitoches Parish, everyone's watching this levee that's right in front of me. It's about 3 miles long. Over the last 12 hours, the water was near the top of the levee. We're also watching the Pearl River near New Orleans. We're told later today it is expected to crest, and it could be record-setting.
Rio de Janeiro declares a state of crisis after torrential rainfall flooded parts of the city. Cars, buses, and local residents are stranded as streets turn into murky rivers. Meanwhile, Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff flew over areas hit by downpours that killed at least 20 people in the state of Sao Paulo.
Breaking news overnight. An Amtrak train with 142 people on board derailed in Kansas. At least 7 train cars jumped the tracks, 20 injured. And now passengers speaking out about what those scary moments were like on board.
Just after midnight,
the train derailment, unknown amount of patients at this time.
Amtrak Southwest chief with 142 on board jumps the tracks.
Okay, there's a guy back here on the second car that needs some oxygen.
7 of the rail cars coming off the tracks, first responders rushing to the scene with passengers injured and describing chaos.
My husband said it was like we were raining down on them and people were falling off of one side, landing on people on the other.
Those passengers traveling from Los Angeles to Chicago say there was screaming in the overturned cars.
They're kind of yelling for help. They're yelling for loved ones. You know, it went dark and people got thrown around, especially in some cars that ended up on their sides. So they're yelling for their family members.
In all, 20 injured. One person airlifted by helicopter to a nearby hospital.
The cars were laid on their sides, so which would actually be a side door, ended up being a door on the top of the train car. And so we had to set ladders up and bring them down on ladders.
Other passengers brought to this evacuation center for evaluation.
I would say we probably have about between 50 and 100 individuals here with us.
This morning, with First Light, Amtrak, and the track's owner, Burlington Northern, will get a first good look at what may have caused this derailment.
Narifar is the shop that never closes and has no staff. People living in this town in eastern Sweden can now shop any time of day at the country's first unmanned grocery store. From getting in to scanning their items, it's all done with an iPhone app. The app links to a user's bank account, so at the end of the month, customers receive an invoice for the goods they bought. Narifar owner, Robert Eliasson.
I was home alone with my kid. I was supposed to give him food, baby food. And I lost the canister of baby food and dropped it into the floor. It was the last one, and I panicked, and we needed to leave to get a new one. And here in the village, we didn't have any open stores. We had to go to the big city, and then I decided that we need a store here in the village that is always open. And of course, having personnel 24/7 is too expensive, so I used technology to solve that problem.
The door stays open for 8 seconds to ensure security, and there are cameras installed inside the store.
Social unrest continues to mount in France. For the third time in 4 days, nationwide demonstrations have been held, this time against the ongoing state of emergency. More protests are planned for next week as the government refuses to withdraw the unpopular austerity reforms.
Thousands of people and over 150 organizations gathered in Paris in opposition to the ongoing state of emergency, with similar demonstrations held around the country. Warrantless raids and arrests with no judicial oversight make France currently a police state, but the ban on public gatherings is becoming more and more significant. More than 70% of France opposes the latest round of so-called reforms to the labor code, but President François Hollande refuses to withdraw his proposed law. The changes would drastically reduce the rights of the average worker, but citizens now risk arrest by protesting publicly. Will the government use the state of emergency to suppress the widespread opposition to the proposed labor laws? These demonstrators say a clear distinction must be drawn between government criticism and terrorism.
Are we supposed to accept a permanent state of emergency? Terrorism has existed for a long time, and unfortunately, it will probably continue to exist. But how many rights are we supposed to hand over to our police, which do not have a great reputation, and for how long?
The French public appears ready to repeatedly defy the state of emergency. Nearly 500,000 people demonstrated this week against the labor laws. More major protests are planned next week as France appears to be entering into a tense period of possibly historic unrest.
Hundreds of thousands of protesters across Brazil have taken to the streets, calling for President Dilma Rousseff to step down. The leftist leader is being blamed for the country plummeting into a recession. She is also accused of corruption as a sweeping investigation known as Operation Car Wash nears her inner circle.
Our country's worst problem is corruption, and this here is a demonstration that population cannot bear any more corruption. We are here demonstrating in favor of Operation Car Wash, in favor of the investigations, judgments and sentences. We believe that justice must be done. No one is beyond the law. Everything must be taken forward and everyone must be judged and punished accordingly.
Anti-government rallies lost momentum late last year, but now they are the biggest ever. They might just encourage Congress to impeach Rousseff, a scenario more than half of Brazilians are said to favor.
Thousands of Iraqis have staged a protest in Baghdad demanding the implementation of the government's promised reforms aimed at fighting widespread corruption. Demonstrators converged on Baghdad's Tahrir Square, where Shia cleric Muqtada al-Sadr, who has called for weekly protests, addressed the crowd. Sadr urged Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi not to yield to political pressure in forming a new cabinet. Last August, Iraq's parliament approved Abadi's proposals aimed at tackling corruption and reducing government costs. Iraqis have been staging weekly protests to voice support for Abadi's sweeping campaign against corruption and mismanagement.
The U.S. has renewed sanctions on several top Venezuelan officials, and protesters here in Caracas are not happy. Leading this government-backed rally is President Nicolas Maduro. He is shouting to the crowd that Venezuela has the world's support and that it should not be threatened by the Yankee empire. This rally, however, lacks the passion of recent years. Maduro has failed to draw out the crowds and the enthusiasm seen during the rule of his popular predecessor, Hugo Chavez. An opposition alliance in the country is gaining momentum in its push to oust him, but Maduro says he is here to stay.
Farmers took to the streets of Brussels, clashing with police as they sprayed hundreds of litres of milk at the European Parliament. They're protesting about overproduction, which is driving prices down, and Russia's ban on EU food imports. The combination, they say, is robbing them of their livelihood. The protest took place as European agricultural ministers met to discuss the problem.
If we don't take stock of the problem, if we can't coordinate and consult with each other better at EU level, we'll head towards an even more critical situation than the one we have at the moment.
The problems began in 2014 when the EU and US imposed sanctions against Russia over its interference in Ukraine's internal affairs. Since then, farmers, particularly French ones, have staged multiple protests.
There is no such thing as a last chance meeting. There's only a will to fight until the end to obtain solutions. That is what I'm going to do.
Now to other breaking news, this time overseas. Two separate terror attacks making headlines. In Turkey, dozens killed in a huge explosion. The blast reportedly from a car bomb near a bus stop in the capital. Several government agencies nearby. In West Africa, Al-Qaeda claiming responsibility for a deadly assault, gunmen targeting 3 hotels, storming an Ivory Coast beach resort. ABC's Alex Marquardt with the new images coming in at this hour.
A bloody Sunday on 2 continents. In Turkey's capital, emergency services responding after an explosion ripped through an area next to a bus stop and government buildings. Debris and bombed-out cars, the dead and wounded carried away. More than 30 people killed, according to the authorities. The U.S. State Department had warned of a potential attack. It was the 4th to hit Turkey in just 6 months, which had been blamed on Turkey's 2 main enemies, the Kurds and ISIS. It came just after news from West Africa that armed attackers had stormed a beach popular with tourists in the Ivory Coast. As they opened fire, witnesses said they shouted Allahu Akbar, God is great. Security forces quickly surrounded the area and evacuated the wounded to safety. The government said 16 people were killed, in addition to 6 attackers, who were believed to be from the Al-Qaeda affiliate in Africa after they claimed responsibility. It's the 3rd time they've struck in the past 4 months after carrying out deadly attacks on hotels in 2 nearby countries, Mali and Burkina Faso. The frequency of these global terror attacks is growing. Whether it's Turkey, West Africa, or here in Europe, intelligence officials say the question about the next attack is not if, but when.
In the French port town of Calais, where the infamous refugee camp dubbed the Jungle is located, local activists have blocked a bridge to prevent refugees from entering the town. Protesters erected a barricade bolstered by oil barrels and bearing the messages "Go home" and "You will not make Europe home." More than a dozen people have been arrested. Well, on Friday, parts of the Calais flashpoint went up in flames. Several shelters, along with a makeshift mosque, were set alight. Over the past 2 weeks, the authorities have been evicting people from the camp and offering them alternative accommodation. There are currently around 6,000 migrants living in the area, most of them hoping to reach the UK. Their desperation was evident earlier this year when more than 100 people stormed a cross-channel ferry. One local was so angry at the behavior of the refugees that he even drew a gun on them.
Right-wing demonstrators marched through central Berlin on Saturday, chanting anti-Merkel slogans. The demonstrators, who appeared to be numbering about 2,000, were accompanied by a heavy police escort. Germany registered nearly 1.1 million people as asylum seekers last year, and Merkel insisted the country will manage the challenge of integrating them. The Chancellor alarmed many European leaders at a summit earlier this week by promoting a last-minute deal with Turkey to stem the flow. A vocal minority has staged protests against her policy, and there has been a sharp rise in the number of attacks on refugee housing in Germany.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel will go ahead with her open gate policy for refugees despite her party's recent defeat in regional elections. Government spokesman Stefan Siebert has said that the federal government will stay course on its refugee policy.
It is not the quantity of water, but the quality of it that's a problem in Newark, New Jersey. This week, water fountains were shut down in city schools due to lead contamination. As Jerika Duncan reports, evidence suggests officials knew about this problem for years.
A memo from the district sent on August 30th of 2014 mandates all schools run and flush each water fountain for 2 minutes daily before school opens. The same steps applied for cafeteria faucets prior to food prep usage. And principals were instructed to tell students and staff to run fountains for at least 30 seconds before drinking the water. Annual water contamination tests at Newark's public schools were conducted between December and February. On Wednesday, the district turned off water at 30 schools after results revealed unsafe lead levels. Evelise Menzi's son attends one of them.
I send my son to school every day to be safe. This is his safe haven, and then lead is in his water.
Japan is marking 5 years since the Fukushima nuclear disaster, triggered by a powerful earthquake and tsunami. But half a decade on, the effects are still being felt to this day. We spoke to one of those who were forced to flee their home. She accuses the government of playing down the dangers of the blast from the beginning.
I saw the terrifying scene on TV. There was a big explosion at the nuclear power plant. The government people and the scientists and professors, they kept saying on TV that there would be no danger. I was like, isn't that weird?
In neighboring Iraq, experts issue more dire warnings about the potential collapse of the country's biggest dam. If the Mosul Dam fails, it would hurl water down the Tigris, flooding cities all the way to Baghdad. Hundreds of thousands could die. CCTV's Kate Parkinson explores the peril posed by what officials are calling the most dangerous dam in the world.
This is Mosul Dam. It is holding back 11 billion cubic meters of water from the river Tigris. But US officials warn it is in danger of an imminent collapse. And if that happens, they say the humanitarian catastrophe would be of an epic proportion. They say that if the dam breaches, it could unleash a 14-meter high wave, sweeping away everything in its path, potentially drowning 1 million Iraqis and displacing several million more.
Frightening report about missiles on a passenger plane. Authorities trying to determine if 2 Hellfire missiles, they have warheads designed to shoot down helicopters, were headed to the U.S. The FBI is investigating, and our Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas is in Washington with the latest. Good morning, Pierre.
Good morning, George. U.S. authorities are trying to check the credibility of this report, and they want to know if these missiles are operational, because if they are, the security implications to the U.S. homeland would be significant. Overnight, a European television network reporting that 2 Hellfire missiles were discovered by Serbian officials at their Belgrade airport, allegedly bound for the U.S. According to European press accounts, bomb-sniffing dogs found the missiles in wooden coffins during a search of cargo on a plane that had flown in from Lebanon. The lethal missiles used to engage a variety of targets weigh roughly 100 pounds, and if armed, are equipped with explosive tips and radar-guided systems, normally attached to fixed-wing aircraft and unmanned aerial vehicles.
You never want a weapon like this found aboard any passenger-type plane.
This morning, the critical question, if these missiles were being sent to the U.S., exactly who was going to receive them, and what were they going to be used for?
The most important issues for the FBI is tracking the origin of these 2 Hellfire missiles and what was really the initial intent of sending them.
Pat, the North says it could wipe out Manhattan with a hydrogen bomb mounted on a ballistic missile, and it warns its hydrogen bomb is much bigger than the one built by the Soviet Union. The Washington Post reports the communist nation says all the people in Manhattan would be killed immediately, and the city would burn down to ashes. Although North Korea's missiles can reach the west coast of the United States, there hasn't been reason to believe they could go as far as New York. And many experts question the North's claim that it has built a hydrogen bomb, while some say it is possible.
Russian President Vladimir Putin on Monday ordered the defense ministry to begin the withdrawal of Russian forces from Syria from Tuesday. The task that was set before our defense ministry and armed forces has as a whole been completed, and so I order the defense ministry to from tomorrow start the withdrawal of the main part of our military contingents from the Syrian Arab Republic, Putin told Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu in televised comments. The Kremlin announced that Putin had called President Bashar al-Assad to inform Moscow's long-standing ally of the surprise move that appears to end the main part of its intervention in Syria's conflict that began in September. A fresh round of talks to end Syria's civil war opened in Geneva on Monday, but hopes for a breakthrough remained remote, with the sides locked in a bitter dispute over the future of President Bashar al-Assad.
Could aliens be trying to contact us? That's the question astronomers are asking after detecting repeating fast radio signals popping off in space.
The first time ever, astronomers say fast radio signals are arriving in patterns from billions of light years away. These millisecond-long flashes were first detected in 2001 when they were caught by the Parkes Radio Telescope in Australia. Since then, only 17 events have ever been picked up. The signals were originally believed to be single bursts of radio waves, likely caused by cataclysmic events. But the researchers at Cornell University who found evidence of repeating FRBs say that theory no longer applies, because in order for the signals to repeat, something must still exist to send them. Cornell professor of astronomy James Cord says, quote, "Only a few astrophysical sources can produce bursts like this, and we think they are most likely neutron stars in other galaxies." Now, astronomers are trying to find out where exactly the repeater is sending these signals from, and next year they will have 3 new radio telescopes to help them. The goal is to see whether a galaxy is located where the repeater's position is in the sky, so they can find out who or what, if anything, is trying to get in contact with us.
Scientists are fighting against the Zika virus with a controversial new method. They want to release genetically modified male mosquitoes carrying a deadly gene. It would make their offspring die before they're old enough to bite. The FDA says the modified mosquitoes are not dangerous to humans or the environment, and in Brazil, scientists are already using these mosquitoes. But critics worry about the side effects.
When you open this Pandora box, it's no way to recall these mosquitoes.
Tall, olive skin, brown hair, and blue eyes. These aren't descriptions found in an online dating profile. They're choices available to those who are sperm shopping. Sperm banks around the world tout stocks from what they say are extraordinary donors, often emphasizing intelligence, beauty, and athletic ability. But experts say transferring those traits to a child is not so simple.
There's no single gene that's responsible for intelligence, and even if somebody were more intelligent, they may have other areas that they're not as strong, and maybe emotional intelligence rather than aptitude is a place that they excel or fail at.
But experts say genetic modification holds great promise in limiting disease. Last year, a group of Chinese scientists from Sun Yat-sen University in Guangzhou announced they had genetically modified human embryos to remove a tiny part of a gene responsible for a fatal blood disorder. Despite the promise, many experts in the field remain opposed to all this research, saying it's dangerously close to crossing ethical lines, especially in regards to gene editing. Last month, the UK became the first country in the world to license genetic modification of human embryos for research purposes. A slow crawl perhaps towards not just designer babies, but genetically modified human beings.